Some machines are born from obsession. Not with comfort, not with convenience, but with the pursuit of pure performance. They carry an energy that feels barely contained, as if every turn of the throttle or twist of the wrist is a challenge to physics itself. These are not everyday rides. They are engineering statements, mechanical proof that the line between racetrack and road can blur until it almost disappears. Among them stands a legend from the mid-1980s, a machine that took lessons learned in Grand Prix competition and offered them to anyone daring enough to try. It was raw, direct, and unforgettable. A time capsule of the two-stroke era that refused to compromise. By the time it arrived, enthusiasts knew they were witnessing something rare. The moment racing technology met public asphalt head-on. Today, we revisit that legend, explore its story, and trace how it turned ambition into adrenaline. Stick around, like the video, and comment which machine you want covered next. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 arrived like a shot of pure adrenaline into a world that thought it had already seen everything. In the mid-1980s, the motorcycle landscape was shifting toward more manageable, refined machines. Manufacturers were chasing smoother delivery, better emissions, and wider appeal. Then came this road-legal missile, a 500 cubic centimeters two-stroke square 4 that barely bothered to pretend it belonged in the same category. Suzuki had taken its RG500 Grand Prix racer, trimmed only what was absolutely necessary, and released it for public roads. That decision was as bold as it was reckless. Few expected a company to build something so extreme for ordinary riders. But that is exactly what made the Gamma unforgettable. At first glance, the RG500 Gamma looked compact, almost unassuming. Its angular fairing and classic Suzuki racing livery hinted at speed, but not at the ferocity waiting underneath. Weighing around 340 pounds dry, the bike carried a 499 cubic centimeters engine producing roughly 95 horsepower, a figure modest by modern standards, but devastating when paired with such a light frame and explosive power band. The result was a machine capable of sprinting from calm to chaos in a heartbeat. Riders who twisted the throttle too early found themselves fighting for control, the front wheel lifting as the two-stroke motor came alive at 7,000 revolutions per minute. It was not about effortless speed. It was about mastering the storm. Suzuki designed the RG500 Gamma's engine with true racing intent. The square 4 configuration meant two parallel twin-cylinder engines sharing a crankcase, each with its own crankshaft. Rotary valves managed the air-fuel mixture with precision that carburetors alone could never match. Each of the 4 cylinders was fed by its own carburetor, delivering an abrupt yet exhilarating surge of power once the revs climbed high enough. The engineering choice mirrored Suzuki's Grand Prix machines, where every ounce of performance counted and throttle control was the difference between victory and defeat. Bringing that same configuration to the street was both a technical flex and an invitation to skilled riders. Can you handle what the professionals ride? But the RG500 Gamma 1986 was more than an engine on wheels. Its chassis and suspension were built to match its feral heart. The aluminum box section frame was a rarity for production bikes at the time. Light yet rigid enough to translate every input directly to the road. Suzuki's engineers tuned the geometry to mimic race dynamics, meaning the bike cornered with surgical precision but demanded total focus. The front forks and rear shock were fully adjustable, allowing riders to tailor the setup to track conditions or personal style. When dialed in, the Gamma offered a sensation of immediacy that few motorcycles since have managed to replicate. The braking system reflected the same ethos. Twin front discs and a rear single disc provided strong progressive stopping power, though it required a skilled touch. Without modern ABS, there was no safety net. The narrow tires of the era added another layer of challenge. Less grip than today's compounds but faster steering response. Every movement, every lean, every throttle input was an exercise in balance. To ride the RG500 Gamma well was to dance at the edge of control, to feel the mechanical heartbeat of a true racing machine. Suzuki's decision to release the RG500 Gamma 1986 was a calculated risk. Regulations on emissions were tightening, and two-stroke engines were falling out of favor for road use. Yet the company knew its racing heritage was too strong to ignore. Fans idolized Suzuki's success in Grand Prix competition, especially with riders who dominated aboard the RG500 racer in the late 1970s and early 1980s. By creating the Gamma, Suzuki offered enthusiasts the rare chance to own something directly descended from those championship-winning machines. It was both marketing brilliance and mechanical defiance. Early testers and motorcycle journalists were stunned. Here was a bike that idled politely but transformed into a razor-sharp predator above the mid-range. The exhaust note crackled with that signature two-stroke shriek, the kind that could raise goosebumps in anyone who loved speed. The gearbox, close ratio and precise, rewarded commitment. The suspension, tuned for performance, punished hesitation. This was not a bike for casual riders or commuters. It was an event every time you started it. The RG500 Gamma didn't just ask for skill. It demanded respect. In the broader context of 1986, the RG500 Gamma was a contradiction. The motorcycle world was transitioning toward more refined four-strokes, such as inline fours that promised smoothness and reliability. Emissions standards and noise regulations were pushing two-strokes into history. Yet here stood a machine that ignored the tide entirely, unapologetically loud, smoky, and uncompromising. It wasn't designed to fit the future. It was built to celebrate the present moment of unfiltered performance. The price was steep, but those who bought it knew exactly what they were getting. A taste of Grand Prix life without a race license. Many owners immediately took theirs to track days, relishing how close it felt to professional machinery. Others used it on the street, where it stood out as a kind of mechanical dare. Few production motorcycles of the time could match its combination of low weight, high power, and scalpel-sharp handling. And fewer still left such a lasting impression on those brave enough to ride them at full throttle. Despite its brilliance, the RG500 Gamma 1986 was not a commercial blockbuster. It was a niche product, appealing to a small audience of skilled enthusiasts. Suzuki likely knew that, but sales numbers were never the point. This was a halo machine, a statement piece showcasing the brand's engineering dominance. It was also a farewell of sorts, the final roar of the two-stroke Titan before regulations silenced that sound. Every part of the Gamma reflected that mentality. From the twin exhausts rising under the seat to the slim aerodynamic fairing, it screamed purpose. Even its quirks added to its character. The peaky power band, the abrupt surge of torque, the light front end that constantly hinted at liftoff. It taught riders discipline. You had to understand its mood, its rhythm, to extract the best from it. It rewarded commitment with breathtaking speed and punished impatience with instability. In hindsight, the RG500 Gamma 1986 captured a fleeting era in motorcycling. One where the line between road and race blurred beyond recognition. It symbolized freedom, risk, and precision all at once. Its legacy didn't lie in numbers on a sales sheet, but in memories and stories shared among riders who dared to experience it. Those who rode it still describe the feeling vividly. The way it came alive on the pipe, the intoxicating mix of oil smoke and adrenaline, the satisfaction of mastering something that never wanted to be tamed. Even decades later, collectors and enthusiasts speak about the RG500 Gamma with reverence. Restored examples fetch high prices, not just for rarity but for what they represent. In a world of electronic aids, traction control, and ride-by-wire systems, the Gamma stands as a reminder of pure analog performance. No filters, no computer intervention, just rider and machine in direct conversation. It remains a symbol of what happens when a manufacturer builds not for the market, but for the passion. To understand why the Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 became such an icon, you have to look at the world that shaped it. The early 1980s were the height of the two-stroke era in Grand Prix racing, where Suzuki's RG500 dominated with a combination of power and agility that competitors struggled to match. Racing was the heart of the company's identity. Success on Sunday was the strongest marketing a brand could have. When Suzuki decided to bring that racing DNA to the street, it was not a cautious move. It was a declaration. The RG500 Gamma was built to prove that high-performance engineering could exist outside the pit lane. Suzuki's engineers had already perfected the RG500 race bike's formula, and translating it for public use meant walking a fine line. The engine had to meet basic durability and usability standards without losing its ferocity. They started with the square four layout. Two parallel twins joined together, sharing a central gearbox and connected via twin crankshafts. This configuration gave the Gamma a unique balance of compactness and torque delivery, something other two-strokes couldn't easily replicate. Each cylinder was water-cooled, keeping temperatures stable under intense load, while rotary valves provided the crisp throttle response that made the motor feel alive. Carburetors were tuned carefully to balance performance and reliability. But in practice, the RG500 Gamma's engine remained a demanding companion. Below 6,000 revolutions per minute, it was almost docile. Past 7,000, it turned wild. The transition was not gradual. It was explosive, as if a hidden switch had been flipped. That sudden rush of power became a defining trait of the bike, giving it a reputation both thrilling and intimidating. Riders learned to dance with the throttle, keeping the revs just above the calm zone where the power band waited to pounce. It was an experience few machines have ever duplicated. The chassis received just as much attention. Suzuki's decision to use an aluminum box section frame rather than steel gave the RG500 Gamma a stiffness advantage that directly improved handling. The bike's geometry placed the rider in a forward, aggressive stance, ideal for cornering precision. Every movement translated instantly through the frame. There was no slack, no vague feedback. When you turned in, the bike responded as though reading your thoughts. The rear suspension used Suzuki's full floater system, a design borrowed directly from its race program. It allowed progressive damping that absorbed bumps mid-corner without upsetting balance, crucial for maintaining control at high speed. But the Gamma's brilliance was not only in its parts, it was in how those parts worked together. Its weight distribution, suspension travel, and wheelbase combined to make it razor-sharp yet stable when ridden with finesse. For those accustomed to heavier four-strokes, the RG500 Gamma felt like a feather in motion. It didn't glide over the pavement. It attacked it. Riders described it as both a challenge and a revelation. Once you adapted to its habits, it became an extension of your body, capable of breathtaking corner exits and acceleration that felt endless. Suzuki's engineers knew they were creating something unique, but even they might not have predicted how much impact it would have. The motorcycle community was divided. Some praised it as the ultimate rider's machine, while others criticized it as too harsh for everyday use. Both were right. The RG500 Gamma 1986 was uncompromising. It wasn't built for comfort or convenience. Its seat was firm, its power delivery brutal, its fuel economy forgettable. But those were small sacrifices for what it offered, a direct connection to racing glory, bottled and sold for the street. In Europe and parts of Asia, the Gamma became a cult sensation. Enthusiasts traded setup tips, modified exhausts, and shared stories of high RPM heroics. The sound of a Gamma on the pipe, a shrill mechanical scream echoing through mountain roads, became an unmistakable signature. It was a bike that rewarded courage and punished hesitation. Few machines demanded as much attention to gear choice, throttle control, and balance. It was not forgiving, but it was honest. In racing circles, the RG500 Gamma's influence was immediate. Privateers began adapting them for club and endurance racing, recognizing the bike's competitive potential straight out of the crate. The chassis geometry, lightweight design, and responsive engine gave them an advantage on twisty circuits where agility mattered most. Even against larger four-strokes, the Gamma could hold its own, especially when kept in its power band. This dual identity, both a road machine and a race-ready platform, cemented its place in motorcycle lore. Meanwhile, other manufacturers were moving in a different direction. Four-strokes were becoming smoother, quieter, and more refined. Electronic ignition and improved fuel systems made them easier to live with. Yet, as the industry evolved toward efficiency, bikes like the RG500 Gamma represented something purer. A snapshot of mechanical intensity that could never be replicated once emissions laws tightened. Suzuki had effectively built the last of its kind, even if that wasn't clear at the time. The engineering behind the RG500 Gamma 1986 revealed Suzuki's mastery of two-stroke technology at its peak. The square four configuration was intricate and costly to manufacture, requiring precise synchronization between crankshafts and gear-driven balancers. Maintenance wasn't simple, but owners accepted that trade-off. For them, tuning the Gamma was part of the ritual. The oil injection system needed careful calibration, and carburetor synchronization had to be perfect to maintain balance between cylinders. This was a bike that rewarded attention to detail as much as riding skill. Its frame design also reflected a race-first mentality. The aluminum construction reduced weight while preserving rigidity, a combination that allowed Suzuki to push performance limits without compromising safety. The suspension's adjustability gave riders unprecedented control for a street-legal machine. Every click, every adjustment could transform the bike's personality, from twitchy and aggressive to composed and track-focused. It was, in many ways, a learning tool. A motorcycle that taught its rider as much as it thrilled them. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 was also ahead of its time in power-to-weight ratio. At roughly 0.28 horsepower per pound, it rivaled many larger displacement bikes. Its acceleration figures stunned testers. 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds, with a top speed exceeding 140 miles per hour. Those numbers might not shock today, but in the mid-1980s, they represented cutting-edge performance. What made the experience unforgettable wasn't just the speed, it was how it arrived. The engine's sudden surge created a sense of raw energy that kept riders alert and engaged every second. Despite its intensity, the Gamma wasn't just a handful of parts tuned for chaos. Its balance was deliberate. The feedback from its controls, the way the throttle and clutch communicated through vibration and sound, created a feedback loop that connected human and machine. Modern bikes often filter out those sensations for comfort. But in the Gamma, they were the point. The rider felt everything. The hum of the gearbox, the vibration of the exhaust, the resistance of the tires at full lean. That level of communication made it an instrument, not just a vehicle. By the time the Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 faded from showrooms, the world around it had already begun to change. Governments were tightening emissions laws, fuel efficiency was becoming a major talking point, and consumers were leaning toward bikes that offered reliability over rawness. The two-stroke engine, once the undisputed king of racing circuits, was entering its twilight. The RG500 Gamma stood as the last great defiance, a statement that performance should never be diluted. Its production run was short, but its impact stretched across generations. For those who owned one, the Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 became more than transportation. It became an obsession. Riders treated it as a living thing that demanded both respect and maintenance. Tuning sessions became rituals, with carburetor adjustments and oil mix calculations taking the place of casual weekend rides. Many bikes were modified for track use, where they could fully express their potential without the constraints of traffic or speed limits. Watching a Gamma scream down a straight was an experience that etched itself into memory. The crackle of the exhaust, the brief haze of blue smoke, and the unfiltered rush of acceleration. The motorcycle's influence rippled through the industry, even as the two-stroke era faded. Manufacturers began exploring ways to replicate its responsiveness and agility through different means. Lightweight frames, aggressive power-to-weight ratios, and sharper handling became hallmarks of the new generation of four-strokes. The RG500 Gamma's legacy lived on in spirit, even if its formula was no longer practical. It had set a new standard for what a street-legal machine could be. The lesson was clear. Riders craved authenticity, even if it came with a challenge. In terms of legacy, the RG500 Gamma 1986 occupies a unique space. It was a machine that blurred boundaries, both in performance and identity. Was it a road bike built from a racer, or a race bike adapted for the street? The truth lies somewhere in between. Suzuki had succeeded in distilling its Grand Prix experience into a tangible, purchasable form. For enthusiasts, it was a chance to live the racing dream without a factory contract. For engineers, it was a benchmark, a reference point for what could be achieved when design was driven purely by performance. Even decades later, the RG500 Gamma remains a prized collector's item. Restorers go to incredible lengths to preserve authenticity, sourcing original fairings, decals, and exhaust systems. The mechanical complexity of the square-4 engine makes it a challenge to maintain, but that only adds to its mystique. Every functioning example is treated like a piece of living history, a reminder of a time when performance came from ingenuity rather than electronics. Owners often describe a sense of pride, not just in riding it, but in keeping it alive. The cultural footprint of the Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 extends beyond the motorcycle world. It symbolizes a moment when manufacturers were willing to take risks for the sake of passion. It represents a bridge between professional racing and everyday riders, a bridge that few companies have dared to build since. Even today, modern sport bikes owe part of their DNA to what the Gamma pioneered. Lightweight construction, responsive handling, and the pursuit of visceral engagement. Its influence is subtle but pervasive, woven into the philosophy of performance motorcycles everywhere. The riding experience itself remains the Gamma's greatest legacy. Those who have ridden one describe the anticipation before the power band hits, the way the bike tenses beneath you, and the sudden, addictive surge of thrust. It's not about speed alone. It's about connection. The rider becomes part of the machine's rhythm, learning when to feed in power, when to back off, and when to let instinct take over. Few motorcycles have ever demanded so much skill while rewarding it so completely. That purity of experience has become rare in modern times. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 also stands as a technological time capsule. It marked the culmination of decades of two-stroke innovation, from early single cylinders to multi-cylinder powerhouses. Its rotary valve induction and twin crankshaft design represented the peak of mechanical sophistication for its class. Beyond the numbers, it embodied the art of balance, between weight and power, risk and reward, chaos and control. Suzuki's engineers achieved something remarkable. They captured the excitement of racing in a package that could, at least in theory, be ridden to work. Yet its brilliance was also its undoing. The very characteristics that made the RG500 Gamma so exciting. Its high revving engine, its oil-burning temperament, its razor-sharp handling, made it unsuitable for the direction the motorcycle industry was heading. As four-strokes became dominant, with cleaner emissions and smoother torque curves, the Gamma became a relic of a fading era. By the end of the decade, two-stroke street bikes were disappearing from showrooms altogether. The Gamma bowed out gracefully, leaving behind a void that no successor could fill. Even so, its reputation only grew with time. Vintage motorcycle gatherings often feature the RG500 Gamma as a centerpiece, drawing crowds who know its story by heart. Younger enthusiasts discover it through archived reviews and grainy race footage, captivated by the sight of a road bike that handled like a GP machine. Its influence persists not just in the engineering realm, but in the collective imagination of riders who long for a purer connection to their machines. The RG500 Gamma 1986 was, in essence, the final expression of a philosophy that prioritized sensation over simulation. It demanded skill, rewarded courage, and punished complacency. It asked riders to meet it on its terms, not theirs. That kind of relationship between human and machine is increasingly rare in today's world of electronic aids and automatic corrections. But that rarity only amplifies its legend. Today, the Suzuki RG500 Gamma stands as one of the most significant motorcycles ever built. Not because of production numbers or commercial success, but because of what it represented. It was the embodiment of a manufacturer's confidence in its own engineering prowess and a love letter to riders who valued challenge over convenience. Its existence reminds us that the greatest machines are not always the most practical. Sometimes they are simply the most honest. Even after all these years, the Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 continues to inspire awe. Its story is not just about technology or performance. It's about the spirit of innovation and the courage to build something uncompromised. For those who ride, restore, or simply admire it, the Gamma remains more than metal and rubber. It is a symbol of passion, precision, and the unbreakable bond between rider and machine. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 may have disappeared from production, but its influence echoes every time a rider twists the throttle on a modern sport bike. It stands as a reminder of what happens when engineers chase performance without compromise, when they prioritize emotion over marketing data. The Gamma's square-4 engine, rotary valve induction, and lightweight aluminum frame were all mechanical innovations that spoke to Suzuki's relentless pursuit of speed. Yet what truly set it apart was its philosophy, its refusal to be ordinary. Looking back, the Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 feels like the closing chapter of the two-stroke age, an era defined by simplicity, power, and sound. It carried the DNA of the company's Grand Prix dominance, but it was more than a tribute. It was proof that the thrill of racing could exist beyond the track. That idea would influence generations of designers and riders alike, shaping how we think about performance motorcycles even today. The Gamma's balance of danger and precision became the standard against which later machines were measured. What endures most is the feeling it delivered. The surge of the engine as it came alive, the scent of oil in the air, the vibration through the handlebars. All of it combined into an experience that felt raw and personal. It was not about speed records or lap times. It was about connection. The RG500 Gamma asked riders to participate fully, to be engaged, to understand the art of control. That kind of experience cannot be replicated by electronics or software. It lives only in machines that demand respect and reward mastery. Collectors today preserve the Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 as more than a motorcycle. It is a mechanical monument to the pursuit of excellence. A time capsule from when manufacturers took risks simply because they could. Its continued reverence shows that people still value authenticity, that even in an age of refinement, there is room for imperfection when it delivers passion. Each surviving Gamma tells a story, not just of technology, but of the riders who believed that machines could have souls. If there is one lesson the RG500 Gamma leaves behind, it is that greatness often comes from audacity. Suzuki built a road-legal Grand Prix machine not because the market demanded it, but because it believed it should exist. That courage, that willingness to go further than anyone expected, created a legend that still commands respect almost 4 decades later. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma 1986 endures as a masterpiece of design, a symbol of purity in motion, and a lasting reminder that the greatest rides are the ones that challenge us most.